Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to use the power of food to give us the energy we need, a body we love, and that zest for life that we all crave. Today, we have one of my favorites. Cyndi O'Meara is with us. Cyndi has published her best-selling book, Changing Habits, Changing Lives, way back in 1998, has since gone on to grow a successful organic food company. Cyndi also established the Functional Nutrition Academy, has made a groundbreaking documentary called What's with Wheat, and I could go on, but the bottom line is, if Cyndi doesn't know this about food, it's just not worth knowing. How's that for an intro, Cyndi?
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that intro. But you know, the more I know, the more I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
You know, we are learning so much, but I still go back to that basic philosophy and basic principles. And if I see science that goes against those, then I have to question it. So yeah, you need a guide to put you through all of this.
I think it's, food is on that same plane as everything else. Information is just changing so much more rapidly. It's like every week there's something different now. And I guess that's one of the advantages of all the technology that we have and the science and so on. But it also gets very overwhelming.
It does get very overwhelming because, right at the moment, there's a huge vegan movement and plant movement, and is that right or is it wrong? And then you read articles and you see that the article says, that animals are producing methane and that's producing a problem with the climate change. And for somebody, like, I've been in this industry for 40 years. So for someone who is not onto what this is about, you can become very confused. And is veganism something that we should be doing or not be doing? And that's a huge question. Is it going to save the planet? Is it going to protect animals and things like that? So these are questions that a lot of people ask me, and if we can stick to the principles, then you don't need to ask me those questions anymore, because once you know the philosophy and the principles of healthy eating, you can look at an article and go, well, I know that can't be right. That's not right. Yeah.
I think it's all part of this picture of confusion. I mean, probably earlier this year when we did our last interview, everybody was paleo. And then within this short amount of time, suddenly everybody's vegan, and we're going, these massive swings. And that's just part of that. What on earth is the right thing to be doing? So let's get back to that philosophy if we can.
Yeah.
And let's leave people with this interview with a bit more confidence. I do want to focus on weight loss a bit if we can, because I know you've had your journey. So maybe if we can start with how you came to be doing this work, and we'll go from there.
How I came to be doing nutrition, or?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and do it really briefly because I am nearly 60, so that's a long story, but let's do it really brief. So I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder. I did pre-med, and while I was doing pre-med, I did a class in anthropology, and I continued that class into my degree, and it was just so exciting and so thrilling. And it was about how food affected our evolution and how we got to be where we are today because of our adaptation to the landscape and to the food that was available to us. So we went from, say, hunter-gatherers to herders to agriculturalists, or the other way around, and then our diet changed to what I call the SAD diet, the Standard Australian Diet. So, but have we adapted to that diet, or are we seeing consequences of that diet where we didn't see the consequences when we were hunter-gatherers, herders, or agriculturalists? So that excited me so much that I came back to Australia and I went to the university in Geelong, which was Deakin, and I studied my Bachelor of Science majoring in nutrition and realised I didn't agree with anything that I was being taught. None of it. It was margarine, low fat, had nothing to do with anthropological principles. And so I thought, well, I can't be a dietitian. So I went back to university and studied human anatomy and pathology and histology and embryology and parasitology and all of those, and realized after 6 years of university that I knew exactly what the human body needed.
Yeah.
And for me, it was an evolutionary diet, a diet based on the principles of how we adapted over millions of years to where we are today without heart disease, cancer, diabetes, infectious diseases that we see in crowded conditions. So I went back to those principles, and that was back in the 80s when I started to consult as a nutritionist.
Yeah.
And I noticed that people going off the SAD diet and going onto a real food diet really started to change.
Yeah.
So I ate everything from legumes to grains, because I was vegetarian for 16 years, by the way. And in that time, I did gain some weight, but then I learnt not to eat as much grain and to go more on animal fat. So I wasn't eating animals, but I was eating their produce, such as dairy and butter and ghee and creams and things like that. So I moved more away from the legumes and the grains and started to eat those types of things. I also had some health issues while I was a vegetarian, and it wasn't until I was around 28 that I thought I need to start eating meat again, because this is not working for me.
Yeah.
Continuing on, I got to around my 50s, and I remember my husband touching my stomach one day and just saying, "Ooh, you're gaining a little bit of weight there." And of course, as a woman would do, don't you dare say that to me. There's nothing wrong with me. But if I really looked deep inside and had a look on the outside, I knew I was gaining weight. It was a very slow weight gain. And I was still eating the same foods. I was still making everything from scratch. I was doing real foods. And many people might have said, "Oh, well, that was just menopause, Cyndi," or "That's just a change of life, and that's just what happens to you." And I didn't want to deal with that. So I went back to my anthropological principles, and I thought, you know what? I haven't done a winter of a hunter-gatherer diet for a long, long time. And I had done them, years ago. I had done, fasts and intermittent fasting and juice fasts, and I'd done things like that, but I hadn't really gone back to those principles. So I decided that I would. So decrease my calories, and all things but lean meats and green vegetables and winter fruits. So that's all that I ate. And in a 3-week period, I managed to lose 9 kilos in 3 weeks, and I've never put them back on again, because then I realized there were certain foods that were causing me issues when I introduced the foods back into the diet. And, that's a whole program that I do. And the more I do this, the more I realize that we have some real health issues in our children, in our teenagers, in our own lives. The more I realize if we go back to the principles of evolutionary eating, we cannot go wrong, because we have adapted to those principles. And that does not mean that there's one diet out there. There are many diets. Like, I've just got back from Africa. I was with the Himbas. So the Himbas they live in a desert. There is no food grown in that desert, but animals can eat and find food. So they have goat and cows, and they basically live off the produce of their goats and their cows. And they do a little bit of hunting, and they will kill animals. So they eat meat and dairy. They don't eat plant foods. They have no weight issues. They have no problems that we see today. So that's one group that I spent time with. The next group that I spent time with were the San and the Kalahari Bushmen and women. And, their diet is that they catch wild meats, because there's lots of wild meats. I can tell you, the amount of zebras and, the deer there, or the antelope that are there in many varieties. They catch these animals from all sizes, and they eat plant foods. They don't eat dairy, so they're a hunter-gatherer. So we have a herder and a hunter-gatherer. Then I found other people, I've been to the Himalayas, where they grow grain. They grow their quinoa and their millet on the sides of mountains. They eat a lot of plant food. They eat a lot of legumes, but not meat so much. They may eat small amounts of meat, but not a lot of meat. So I know that we can adapt to many, many diets. but we cannot adapt to modern diet.
Yeah.
We do not have the ability to adapt to it. And so what we see now is we see kids with autism and allergies and food sensitivities and asthma and hyperactivities. We see teenagers now with anxiety and depression. This wasn't happening that long ago. We didn't have this happening like in my era.
No.
And then we have an adult population that is filled with food sensitivities, autoimmune disease, heart disease, insulin resistance, which leads to heart disease, calcium that is building up in their arteries, as well as cancer. And oh my gosh, it is mind-bending at the moment. And I really take that back to, number one, our agricultural principles, how they're growing our food. And so even if you are on a real food diet, if you're still eating foods that are coming out of a grocery store with the agricultural principles that we use in Australia today and around the world, then you're missing the point of this. You're missing the whole point. And we have to start being advocates as individuals and going back to the principles of organic farming, biodynamic farming, permaculture, local farmers, like supporting our local people out there and eating those foods. I don't know when this is going to go to air, but right now we are in a strawberry crisis because our big strawberry makers or our big strawberry growers are, there's needles being found in strawberries. If we go back to our very local farmers, our food security is going to be so much better than these very big producers. And it's sad to say, but this is what is happening. And I've just noticed, just down the road, because I'm in a big strawberry growing area, just down the road, they've killed all the strawberries and they've used Roundup.
Oh, God.
And you just kind of go, anyway.
Yeah.
I get so upset. And this is what is causing real issues. Now, I know I may be long-winded there, but that is where I'm at the moment. So I've gone from anthropological principles, and I've come back to anthropological principles, gone back to that evolutionary eating and the local foods, the small-time farmers, which is what we were only 100 or so years ago. We haven't been broad acre farmers and, feedlot farmers for very long.
To try and bring a bit of clarity around these points. So if you were to pluck me out of Torquay in Victoria and put me down in that tribe in Africa and I only had meat and dairy to live on, am I going to be healthy?
Yes, you will adapt. You will adapt better than you're adapting if I put you in the supermarket and told you to eat breakfast cereals, low-fat milk, margarine, lean cuisine, healthy choice. If you're eating, you will not adapt to those. Whereas you will adapt. You may feel sick for a little while, and that will be your body detoxing and changing over from surviving on glucose to surviving on fat. So we call that you go into ketosis. And these guys are in ketosis a lot of the time. It's very rare that they get out of ketosis. They may if there are, let's say if there's rain and food's available, because I went with the Bushmen and we found melons. They look like watermelons, these tiny little watermelons about that size. And so they eat those. So that's them eating carbohydrates when the rains come. So they'll be in a state where they're using fat for their energy source as opposed to glucose for their energy source. They can also, if they've run fast, they can convert their lactate or their lactic acid into an energy source as well. So we are able to do this. We have an amazing body. And if people could wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, this thing, you think about what it does. And it survives a slow death of you eating lean cuisine, healthy choice, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, breakfast cereals, margarine, low-fat milk. I go into a grocery store now, which is rare, because I live on the principles I'm talking to you about. And they may take you a little bit of time to figure out, but once you figure them out, they are easy. But, I walked into the grocery store, and it was one of our big Woolworths stores in the Sunshine Coast. And it's rows and rows and rows of food. And I think, oh, my God, people eat this shit. And it's rows and rows and rows, and it's filled with additives and preservatives. And And I love how they go, oh, no artificial preservatives, no artificial flavors, no artificial colors.
Yeah.
Oh, but there's natural. But do you
Mm.
know in Australia there is nothing in the food standards guide for the name natural? So basically, natural is just a stupid word, a
Yeah.
word that has no guidelines. Anybody can put it on and it means nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Natural colors, natural flavors is just, it's artificial.
Yeah.
There is
Leave
no
it.
good flavors, no good colors out there,
Yeah.
except if it is in the food, such as beetroot, which is red, such as lettuce, which is green. That's natural.
I'm gonna go back again because I'm
Okay.
fixated on this point. So we've been talking about needing to eat like our ancestors eat. So maybe if you're from Scotland, it's going to be a little bit different than if you're from Turkey, or because of this beautiful microbiome that we're all learning more and more about. But what you're saying is that that's not necessarily something we need to be so fixated on. It's the real food without all the yeah.
Your microbiome will adapt to the food that you're eating,
Mm.
which will then allow you to adapt to the food that you're eating.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool. Like if we look at cultures around the world and their microbiome, they're very different because of the foods that they're consuming. So in Tanzania, there is a group that their microbiome has been heavily tested. There's about 300 of them that still exist. They're called the Hadsas, and they eat small game to large game meat, and very, very tough tuberous vegetables, which we could not digest. But they have a bacteria which is very similar to syphilis, believe it or not. They have this bacteria, it's related to syphilis, that allows them to digest these tubers.
Yep.
So if they came to Australia, let's say, and they were given fruits and they were given real foods, then they're and let's say they've got dairy as well. So they have no bifidus, by the way. So bifidus comes from dairy. So the Hadsas have no bifidus. You bring them to Australia and you give them good quality organic dairy, they will have bifidus in their system. So we as humans have traveled for, thousands of years. Like if you think of it, in Namibia and Botswana is where they think the human civilization started. Or humans started. Well, we traveled north. So the foods that were available, let's say thousands of years ago, would have been almost like foods in Victoria, because it would have been about the same latitude. There would have been similar in climate. There would have been grasses and things like that, because you can see it when you walk in their landscape. You can see where the great rivers ran and where the snow-capped mountains were. So you can see this, but the climate has changed, and that was not humans that changed that. That was the pulse of the human earth. This is Mother Earth pulsating, so ebbing and flowing, having dry seasons and hot seasons, wet seasons and dry seasons. So it all changed. And so we had to travel north. And as we traveled north, food differences would have changed. Our availability for food would have changed. And then there would have been something that happened and we would have had to travel south again. Once again, those foods would have changed. The Himbas, they say that they came from northern Africa only 600 years ago to Namibia. Yeah. And they would have had to change their diets from a very tropical food to dairy and meat. But they adapted. What's happening now is that we are destroying the microbiome. So even real foods are becoming a problem to people. Yeah. And that's what's scary. Is, back in the 80s when I changed somebody's diet from a SAD diet, standard Australian diet, to a real food diet, we had major changes. Yeah. I can change somebody from a SAD diet to a real food diet, and we have major allergies and food sensitivities and bloating and all sorts of things happening because we've destroyed the ability of our body to adapt, which is our microbiome. That's what helps us adapt to foods. So what we have to do is build that microbiome back up again. Yeah. And what we have to do is stop eating foods that are causing the destruction of the microbiome. And number one, that is modern day agricultural practices,
Yep.
where they spray Roundup and glyphosate on everything. And it's an antibiotic. It's a patented antibiotic. Yet most people go, but I was told it was safe.
Yeah.
No. You know, in the US, in the last month or so, a gentleman sued Monsanto, which is now Bayer, for he got cancer as a result of using Roundup on a schoolyard. He used it for 2 years, and he spilt some on his skin, and he got this rash, and the rash got worse and worse, and he contacted Monsanto and said, look, I think the Roundup's caused this rash. I don't know what to do about it. They ignored him.
Yeah.
They then asked for a $6 million payout for this gentleman. So his lawyers, and one of them was Robert Kennedy Jr., they asked for a $6 million payout, and Monsanto said no. Anyway, the court case was finished, and the Monsanto was told that they had to pay him $289 million in damages for Roundup. So you cannot tell me that there's something sus there, because there were a lot of internal papers that had to be shown by Monsanto as to their lying, their cheating, their associations with the EPA, their associations with the FDA. Remember, this is America, but we take our lead from America. So our authority, which is called the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medicine Authority, takes their lead from the EPA. So they have registered 500 products that has glyphosate in it, Roundup. So has glyphosate in it in Australia. They've registered those. And, you know, there's, even with this court case and 8,000 other plaintiffs talking about how it's destroying their lives and it's causing a cancer, they're still not banning it. They're still spraying it everywhere. On our food, those strawberries were sprayed with it. True, we're not going to eat them, but we're going to eat the next batch.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they're not going to have that land go to fallow, I think it's called. You know, they're not going to do that. They're going to just put strawberries on this next patch.
Yeah, I've just noticed up the road from where we are, they're setting up a new farm where people can go and pick their berries. And I'm just, I don't know. I'm hoping there's going to be an organic sign up there somewhere, but I haven't seen it yet.
My girlfriend was a strawberry grower, and she just said to me, Cyndi, whatever you do, don't eat strawberries.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, berries are one of the most highly sprayed crops we have, unfortunately. So
that's why we go grow your own. They're easy. I've got strawberries growing at the moment. Blueberry trees down in your way, Victoria. Oh, I go to the organic blueberry farm in central Victoria all the time. You know, that we can do this ourselves. And people are probably rolling their eyes at me right now and just going, I don't have time. But if you don't take time for your health and your wellness now, then I guarantee you will take a lot of time for sickness. When I was in Namibia, I met this beautiful man from Kenilworth, of all places. He was working at one of the resorts that we went to, or one of the lodges that we went to, and I spent quite a bit of time with him because he loves archaeology and he loves the stars, and they're my two loves. Is, you know, how did people live? And he took me to a site where people lived, and he showed me how they lived. And anyway, we started talking, and 6 years ago he got cancer. It took him 2 years to get over the chemo and the radiation and the cancer that he had. He lost 2 years of his life, and he's still paying the consequences of this. So let's really, if we're mothers and we're a league of extraordinary women and mothers, let's make a difference. You know, let's not play small. You know what? We don't have that right anymore. We have to stand up for what's happening. And, you know, I know a person in your area, you know, she's created a Facebook page about stopping the council in your area spraying glyphosate, you know, and Roundup. Good on her, you know, like, and good on what you're doing. I just think we need to step up as women.
Support each other.
That was a bit of a lecture, wasn't it? Sorry.
No, it's great. I was lost. I'm right there with you, Cyndi. It's all good.
There you are.
Okay, so let's think. Where are we going? Let's go back to the weight loss stuff, because I know
Okay.
that's something that just keeps coming up and up. And I know that I still do this crazy, I'm always trying to work out. And that comes from spending my teenage years, 20s, 30s overweight. I did the 20 years vegetarian, all organic, all whole food, still overweight, still no energy. So it's a journey, it's learning. We're all learning all the time. So what can we learn from you about weight loss and getting this idea
Yeah.
sorted?
Um, I know that evolutionary wise,
Yeah,
that we would put on weight in the summer, which
yeah,
is not when we want to put it on because we want to wear our bikini, and we would lose it in the winter.
yeah,
And when you get an understanding of why this happens, then you have a little bit more grace with yourself. You kind of go, well, that's just the way I am. I'm that way now. I will put on a couple of kilos every summer
yeah,
because I'm not going to miss out on my mangoes and my grapes and my cherries and my peaches and my nectarines.
yeah.
I'm going to eat the carbohydrates.
Mm.
And at my age, like I said, I'm nearly 60. So at my age, that will put weight on, most definitely. And then in the winter, they're not available. I've just been to Africa. All I've eaten is meat, basically, and veg because there's nothing else there to eat. And I lose that weight again in winter. And it was freezing cold. It was like 0 during the nights, and then it might heat up to 30 degrees in the day. It was weird. It was just like you freeze at night. And so you have this beautiful ebb and flow depending on what is happening. So this ebb and flow was very, very important because you would put weight on in the summer when food was available to survive the winter. So for me, sometimes we just have to realize if we want to eat these sweet fruits, that this is what's going to happen, women and men. It will happen too. The older you get, the more exaggerated that will become. And if we stick to a real food diet, and depending on your age and where you are with fertility, then will depend on what will work for you. And we've forgotten to listen to our bodies. So look, the scales are an amazing thing to use as a tool.
Mm.
Let's say you've gone out and for the last week you've eaten the same foods, and you've had no problems, and then you wake up the next morning and your jeans are tight and your shirt's tight and everything's tight, and if you got on the scales you'd see 1 to 2 kilos you've increased. That is not fat.
Yeah.
That cannot be fat. But everybody goes, wow, what have I done? I've done nothing. How could have I gained 2 kilos? And then it's like, oh, I don't care anymore. I'll just keep eating, And we go into this. But if we understand what the body's done, is that you've eaten the same thing for a week and then you've gone out and you've eaten something you don't know what's in that food, or you've drunk some wine, or you've drunk something, your body doesn't like it. It will inflame. It will gain water to protect you. And if we understand this, then we don't go off on a tangent, because everybody gets on the scales and they gain a kilo and they have a fit.
Yeah.
But it's just water weight in 24 hours. It can't be anything else. If you're eating the wrong foods and you're gaining weight slowly, then that's going to be fat being put down. But we have to realize that fat being put down is a survival mechanism. Mm-hmm. So if you're stressed, the body will hold on because it's thinking this guy's running or this girl's running and she's stressed and she's this and she's that. I need to hold fat on because when she stops running, I'm going to need them for a reserve. Yeah. And we look at our fat and we look at our weight and we punish ourselves with this, as opposed to going, oh my gosh, look what my body is doing. I have to listen to that body. So I drank red wine and I did that Thai food in that Thai restaurant. There must have been something in there that my body didn't like. Yeah. That's okay. Let me just get back to my normal way of eating. It'll drop it in 24 hours. Yeah. It'll be gone. So it's number one, listening to your body and understanding and educating yourself about this amazing body. And what did I read recently? It was, don't be upset about what you didn't do to get the result you didn't get. And we do that. We go, how could that be? You've been out there eating eclairs and drinking stuff and doing this and doing that. And sometimes I think we just have to be truthful to ourselves and realize, well, you ate that. This is the consequences. And I know that's hard, but we have to be truthful to ourselves. Like, I have this girl that told me that she's doing everything right. And she doesn't understand why she's gaining weight, and she doesn't understand this. And I had an opportunity to be with her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a while. And I watched her. Yeah. And she was doing everything wrong, eating way too much food. Yeah. And not listening to her cues. See, I don't know if people just lie to themselves to feel better about themselves or to make me think that that's okay. I don't know. I haven't figured this out. So I would think that the most important thing is you have to be truthful to yourself. Yes. Because if you're not truthful to yourself, then you're going to think that, you've done nothing wrong. And so for me, the universe is
picking on you.
Exactly. Or it's not fair, or I'm unlucky. There is no such thing as victims and unlucky. It's about you taking responsibility in a big way. And so, Edwina, I know you know these principles. And so your weight gain and weight loss, if you think about it, it could be that summer and that winter. Yeah. And we don't realize it. And plus the hot weather changes everything in our circadian rhythms. We have longer days. We don't sleep as much. We do eat a different food because different foods are available if you're eating local. And then the winter comes, you have shorter days, you do sleep more, you hibernate more, and your body goes into a state of, I'm going to use those fat cells because I'm not getting the carbs anymore. Does that help and make sense?
It does make sense. And I think, I feel this has been a particularly stressful year for me. And I think that is actually the picture, because I know what to eat and I know the things that work for my body, but I just can't shift. And I think it's just that stress. And if I can work on, like life just keeps getting busier and busier and busier, and I take responsibility for that, but I just can't shift it right now. And I think that's the missing link in my picture.
And stress is a huge thing because your body will hold when you are stressed. And you need a way to pull that stress down every night. And whether that's a meditation, whether that's going out, sitting in front of a fire and looking up at the stars, whether that's doing, like my de-stress is, like I can hardly wait to go to bed so I can wake up. That's how I feel, because I get up, and I think I've already said this in the last one, but I get up, I get dressed, I get on my bike, I go straight to the beach. I swim with a group of beautiful people. I walk back on the sand, in a bikini, back on the sand. So I'm grounding, I'm getting lots of magnesium and lots of irons because of the ocean. And then I have a long black, and then I go home and have a healthy breakfast, and then I go to work. Now, whether you have to get up at, depending on summer or winter, what time you have to get up, and that's my routine. That doesn't mean that's everyone's routine, but maybe it's going out. And I know your beautiful area, you've got that beautiful beach. You can walk along that beach. You can still be soaking up those irons that are coming off that beach. Yeah. But I believe that it's letting the body know that you've woken with sunshine or cloud. It doesn't matter, but letting the body know, or rain. Get out in your raincoat. Yeah. And then our nights are often, we finish dinner and we might sit down in front of the television. But if I've just had 2 weeks in Africa, and African television is a fire. That's what it is. You sit around a fire because there is no television, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no nothing. And you are committed to do that. Otherwise, you go sit in your bunk and do nothing. So you're committed to be there. And I realized, that these are our ways to de-stress, and we're not doing that. Yeah. And you have had a very stressful year. And you need to make sure you are doing those things, as all of us do. It's not just you, but it's everybody needs to do this, because stress will keep weight on, because the body is thinking it is in a flight or fight situation, and it will hold things. It won't digest. It will pull blood from your heart and digestive system and put it into your appendages to help you. So
we have, I look around at all my girlfriends and the women that colleagues that I know doing the work that we do, and we know this stuff, but I don't think I can name anybody except for you who's just been to Africa that is actually putting it into place. We are just so busy. And I think I love, one of my favorite movies is Eat, Pray, Love, and this scene, and I know people that follow me, I bring this up so often, but it's that dolce far niente, which is in Italian, it's just sweet nothing. And they laugh at Americans, and Australians are the same, that we feel like we have to earn it. You've got to flog yourself in order to earn a week's break, once a year or something. But this idea that we need to take time every day to unwind, we are so programmed not to do that or to feel guilty about it, particularly mums, I think, particularly mums.
Yeah, and we really do need, need that. It's interesting. One of the girls I traveled with in Africa, and people, if you've got mothers listening to this, this is a really interesting thing. She wanted a change in life. Like, she's a very smart woman. She, as general manager of, orthopedic stuff, she goes into surgeries and shows doctors how to put, bones, what are they called? Like, when you replace a bone, like a hip. So hip replacements or knee replacements. She shows them how to. So she's a smart woman.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I want to do something different. And I said, what do you want to do? She said, I don't know. I said, well, if you don't know, how's the universe going to deliver it? You're just not going to get it. And I said, if you did know, what would it be? And she said, well, I really love the fact that I have, every 6 months, I have a new young girl from overseas come into my home and be an au pair. And I teach them how to move away from their family and their mother, and how to become independent in another family, so that when they go home, they're grown up and, they've come away detracted from their mother, and they're able to live an independent life. She said, I'd love to teach au pairs how to do this. So we were talking about this in Africa. I fly home Sunday. I love the crossword in the Australian newspaper. I can't find a cheap free one anywhere, so I buy one at the Sydney airport. Yeah. On the front page, there is, I think I've kept it. I may have kept it, but there is the au pair versus childcare. Oh. And they had the whole comparison about au pair versus childcare in cost, in time, in stress, in everything. And I remember I had an au pair.
Yep.
I had her for a year. And it's the most de-stressing time of your life, because you have an extra woman in the house that is there for you and your children, is cheaper than childcare, is easier than childcare. And I just couldn't believe it. And I just went, oh my gosh, she put out to the universe what she wanted. And there it was on the front of the Australian 4 days later. Brilliant. Yeah. So to de-stress, think about different ways of doing things, because childcare is expensive. It's $1,200 a week to have one child in childcare. Imagine if you've got 4.
I do.
4 in childcare. Why go to work? There's no point in it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't.
Exactly. Yeah. But maybe having that, and when you look at the cost of the au pair and, I just think, and maybe some people can't afford an au pair, so live next to relatives or near girlfriends, where you say, I'll have one day, you have one day, and we'll take each other's children.
Yeah.
We just have to start working as a community. I've already said, we have to start supporting our local farmers, and we have to start supporting our local women, and supporting each other and getting back into the community. And this is what I know you're teaching, and we do need to get back to this.
It goes back to that saying, it takes a community to raise a child. I think there's so many pictures to this, anxiety that we're seeing just in so many children. And I think, Steve Biddulph talks about needing aunties and other women in our children's lives, particularly in our girls' lives, but, boys and girls, it's all part of that picture. There's all these little bits of the puzzle, but it's all that going back to sort of traditional stuff, isn't it?
It is. And we can do it. It doesn't matter whether you live in a city, you can do it.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much, Cyndi. I know people are going to want to tap into lots more from you. Where's the best place to look?
Just go to changinghabits.com.au. Everything is there. If you want to educate yourself more on nutrition, go to F for functional, N for nutrition, so fn.academy. They're the two best places, and they're also on Facebook and Instagram, and it's everywhere. People can we're there. We're around.
You're out there.
We're out there, and we are in education. We're here to help, and I just think women are trying to do it alone, and they shouldn't be doing it alone. They should be having a community with them and helping in every way, from a community garden to community services. Like we were talking about, to de-stress and take that time out.
Community of empowered, extraordinary mothers. Thanks for being part of it, Cyndi.
Thank you.
All right, bye for now.